There is a version of you that formed an opinion about something a long time ago. Maybe it was about your industry. Maybe it was about a person. Maybe it was about what you're capable of, or what kind of person you are, or how the world works. And since then, without you noticing, without you deciding, that opinion became invisible, not a belief you hold, a lens you see through. And everything that has happened since, every piece of evidence, every conversation, every new experience, has been filtered through that lens before it ever reached your judgment. Evidence that confirmed what you believed. You absorbed it. Evidence that contradicted it. You dismissed it, minimized it, found a reason it didn't count. Adam Grant is one of the world's leading organizational psychologists, a Wharton professor who has spent his career studying how people think, change their minds, and refuse to change their minds. And his argument, made with a precision that is genuinely difficult to dismiss, is that the ability to rethink is the single most important and most undervalued cognitive skill of our time. Not intelligence, not knowledge, not confidence, the willingness to think again. This is Think Again, and it is about to challenge something you were absolutely certain was true. Let's break it. Section 1. The thinking traps nobody warns you about. Grant opens with 3 mental modes. He argues most people spend the majority of their time in, and only one of them produces, the kind of thinking that actually leads to good decisions. The first mode is the preacher. When you are in preacher mode, you are protecting a belief you already hold. Someone challenges your position, and instead of examining it, you build a case for it. You find more evidence. You craft a better argument. You become, in real time, a lawyer for a verdict you reached before the trial began. The problem is not the conviction. The problem is that the conviction arrived before the evidence, and the mind's energy is now being spent defending the conclusion rather than examining it. The second mode is the prosecutor. In prosecutor mode, your goal is not to find the truth. Your goal is to win, to prove the other person wrong, to find the flaw in their argument, to demolish their position. Not because you have better information, but because being right feels significantly better than being wrong. The third mode is the politician. In politician mode, your beliefs shift not in response to evidence, but in response to the audience. You say what the room wants to hear. You adjust your position based on who is listening, not because you have genuinely changed your mind, but because agreement is more comfortable than the friction of a real position. All 3 modes, Grant argues, are understandable. All 3 are deeply human. And all 3 produce systematically worse thinking than the mode almost nobody defaults to, the mode of the scientist. The scientist holds beliefs as hypotheses, subject to revision when new evidence arrives. The scientist is more attached to finding what is true than to being right about what they already think. The scientist experiences changing their mind not as defeat, but as progress. And the scientist, in any room, in any negotiation, in any strategy session, thinks more clearly than everyone else. Not because they are smarter, because they are genuinely willing to be wrong. Section 2. The enemies of rethinking. Why is thinking again so difficult? Grant identifies 2 specific psychological forces that work against it, and they are so common that most people experience them daily without ever naming them. The first is cognitive ease. The mind prefers things that feel familiar. Information that is easy to process feels more true than information that requires effort. This means that the belief you have held longest, even if it was formed without evidence, feels more credible than a new idea, supported by careful reasoning, simply because it is familiar. You are not evaluating the idea. You are evaluating how it feels. To consider the idea, and familiar always feels better. Grant calls this the source of most confirmation bias. Not a deliberate selection of evidence, but an unconscious preference for the cognitive comfort of what you already believe. The second is identity fusion. This is the deeper enemy, and the one that makes rethinking feel genuinely threatening rather than merely uncomfortable. Identity fusion is what happens when a belief stops being something you hold and becomes something you are. My political views, my dietary philosophy, my approach to parenting, to business, to money, my opinion on this person, this industry, this way of seeing the world. When a belief is fused to identity, evidence against the belief feels like an attack on the self. And the self defends against attacks. This is why the most confident people in any room are often the most resistant to rethinking, because for them, changing their mind is not an intellectual update. It is a kind of self-betrayal. Grant's prescription: separate your opinions from your identity. Define yourself by your values, curiosity, honesty, rigor, not your conclusions. A person whose identity is built on being someone who finds the truth can change their mind freely, because changing their mind is the most authentic expression of who they are. A person whose identity is built on being someone who is right cannot change their mind at all, because every update is a loss, not a gain. Section 3, the practical framework. How do you actually build the rethinking habit in yourself and in your conversations with others? Grant gives you a set of tools that are immediately applicable. Tool 1. Think like a scientist. Run experiments on your beliefs. Grant's most practical recommendation: treat your most important beliefs as experiments rather than conclusions. For any belief you hold with high confidence, ask yourself 3 questions. What would change my mind about this? What evidence would I need to see to update this belief? Have I actively looked for that evidence, or only for evidence that confirms what I already think? If you cannot answer the first question, if there is no conceivable evidence that would change your mind, that is not a sign of strong conviction. That is a sign of a closed system, and closed systems do not improve. Tool 2. Schedule regular belief audits. Grant recommends a practice he calls the rethinking scorecard, a deliberate, periodic review of your most significant beliefs and assumptions, not the trivial ones, the ones driving your biggest decisions, your beliefs about your market, about your team, about what you are capable of, about what the competition is doing, about what your customers actually want. For each one, ask honestly, when did I form this belief? What has changed since then? What would I think if I were forming this belief today? For the first time, with everything I now know, most people find, when they do this honestly, that a significant number of their most consequential beliefs are running on evidence that is years, sometimes decades, out of date. Not because they are not smart, because the belief became invisible, a lens rather than a position. And nobody told them. They were supposed to keep checking it. Tool 3. Argue like you are right. Listen like you are wrong. This is the line from the book that most people find immediately useful and immediately uncomfortable. It separates the productive function of confidence, pursuing a position with enough commitment to develop it fully, from the destructive one, where commitment to the position becomes refusal to hear anything against it. Grant argues that the best thinkers hold both simultaneously. They argue with conviction, and they listen with genuine openness, not sequentially arguing first, then listening when the argument is lost, but simultaneously, in the same conversation, at the same table, at the same moment. Tool 4. Find a challenge network. Most people build what Grant calls a support network, the people in their life who validate their ideas, encourage their plans, and tell them what they are already hoping to hear. Grant argues this is the wrong network. for anyone trying to think clearly. What you need is a challenge network. The people who are genuinely on your side and genuinely willing to tell you. When your thinking has a hole in it, the colleague who will say, "Have you considered the opposite?" The friend who will ask, "What are you not seeing here?" The advisor who will challenge your assumption, not to be difficult, but because they care more about you getting the right answer than about you feeling good about the wrong one. The size of your challenge network is one of the most reliable predictors of the quality of your thinking. Over time, Tool 5, embrace the joy of being wrong. Grant calls this the most important mindset shift in the book, and the one that sounds simple until you try to actually do it. Most people experience being wrong as a loss, as embarrassment, as evidence of inadequacy. Grant reframes it completely. Being wrong means you know something now that you did not know before. That is not failure. That is the fundamental mechanism of growth. The person who is never wrong is the person who is never learning. And the person who is never learning is falling behind, quietly, steadily, in a world that is changing faster than any fixed set of beliefs can keep up with. Section 4, the reframe that changes everything. Here is the idea I want you to carry out of this video. Grant makes a distinction that reshapes the entire conversation about confidence and conviction. He separates armchair confidence from scientific confidence. Armchair confidence is certainty about what you already believe, the feeling of knowing, independent of evidence, that you are right. Scientific confidence is different. It is the belief in your ability to figure out what is true, even if that means discovering that what you currently believe is wrong. One protects conclusions. One produces them. And here is the counterintuitive part. The person with armchair confidence appears more certain in any given moment. They are louder, more decisive, more comfortable projecting authority. But over time, across years and careers and relationships, the person with scientific confidence makes better decisions, builds better things, and navigates change with significantly less damage than the person who was never willing to be wrong. Because the world does not stay still. The evidence keeps arriving, the map keeps needing to be updated, and the only person positioned to update the map accurately is the person who accepted, long before it was comfortable, that the map they were holding was always provisional, always subject to revision, always a hypothesis, not a verdict. So here is the pattern this book is asking you to break, the pattern of treating your most important beliefs as settled, of carrying the lens you formed years ago into every new situation, and seeing only what the lens allows. Adam Grant's argument is direct and genuinely difficult to dismiss. The world's most effective thinkers are not the most certain. They are the most willing to be wrong, the most willing to rethink, the most able to hold conviction and openness, at the same time to argue like they are right and listen like they are wrong. That is not a personality trait. It is a skill, and like every skill in this series, it starts with the decision to practice it in the ordinary moments before the big ones arrive. Now, I want to ask you something before you click away. What is one belief you have been holding that this video made you want to examine, not to abandon, not to defend, just to look at honestly, the way a scientist would, and ask, is this still true? Is this still the best map I have? Drop it in the comments. These conversations are the reason this channel exists, and what you write might be exactly what someone else watching this needed to hear today. If this breakdown gave you something worth keeping, a like takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm this kind of thinking deserves to be seen by more people. And if you are not yet part of this channel, subscribe. Every week, we break down the books and ideas that help you think at a genuinely different level, to see the patterns underneath the surface of your decisions, your habits, and your life. The next breakdown is already coming, and if you made it this far, it was made for you. Think differently, live intentionally. I'll see you in the next one.